Hey everybody, this is Devin Domingo, your resident solutions engineer here at Better Cloud. Here to talk about a pretty urgent topic, I'd say, during these times. I'd love to go over some technical gotchas and little things that I think will kind of things to consider, especially in this trying time where I'm just hearing about different companies planning a lot of different layoffs and reductions in force or offboarding or whatever you want to refer to it. We need to really think about our offboarding procedures now, and they've been really good for kind of day to day when people leave on their own accord. But when you start planning for a mass offboarding, there are certain employee experience considerations that you should really be making and should really be considering with a tool that is able to help you with problems around when employees are supposed to be notified about their last day, around how do you help collaboration and really help that experience later when the employee leaves. What do you do with their assets, and how do you kind of continue running your company? As well as things that may be causing extra risk or extra threats just around that employee leaving. I'm going to kind of go through this discussion knowing that you already have a basic understanding of offboarding. So I already know you have steps in your process that suspend accounts, things that will remove their access to different files or folders or groups. I'm going to assume you've already kind of built these in and already kind of planned or started some of that journey of automating some of that work. And I'm going to go. So with that, let me walk you through the Better Cloud platform through 3 big tips that I think are going to really help you. The first one I'd love to really talk about is this one around when and how you should really start somebody's offboarding. Now, I think the moment that an employee knows that there is a mass offboarding or there's something that's about to happen, you'll start to see employees start to panic a bit. And what that looks different for other people. They were going to get worried, when am I going to get cut off? I still have stuff to do. Obviously, their relationship is changing right now in the company as they learn about this. And of course, you should really personalize in time when people are supposed to know about this. And hopefully they know about it on their time zone from their manager. They know about some of the circumstances, and this has been personalized over a message. And while this is all kind of happening, your IT team should be aware that that person is kind of in their meeting. Now, I understand it's very hard to do this at scale for each individual employee when you got an IT staff of not enough. But I believe you could start to really plan these and coordinate these with managers where you could start the offboarding based off their time zone or based off their location. So what you're looking at right now, this is Better Cloud's workflow engine. This is how we actually build these automations in a simple and a scalable way using these when, if, then statements. But what you'll notice is the when, if statement that I've pointed to is a Google specific one based off an org unit drop. So the moment that your help desk staff is adding somebody to a leavers organizational unit, then your process is kicking off. And you'll notice what I've done here in this if statement is the leavers that I've specified, I've built different org paths in my OU structure in Google Admin to specify when I would actually offboard this person. So the San Francisco employees get their own leaving group, the New York staff gets their own leaving group, and I'll have multiple workflows that reflect the different location-based offboarding. So that way, when my manager's in the room and having these unfortunate conversations, IT staff, all they really have to do is drop them into an org unit to kick off the automated process. Now, let's say hypothetically, Google is not your source of truth. We have other options too, where maybe with some the IDPs like Okta, where I could do things where users add it to group and specify which Okta group I add them to, similar to how there's the levers for different locations. I would have different Okta groups representing that. And you could kind of rinse and repeat this process through our native integration. So things like one login groups and roles as well. We could do the same thing for something like Azure groups when they're being added or removed to specific Azure groups that also represent location. And then also with Office 365, if we need to represent that when they're added to different groups. So we have different ways for you to represent how you're going to drop people into these leaver groups for locations. But we highly recommend this so that way people don't feel like they're getting their system slipped under them when they haven't even ended their day or started their day. I think that just creates mass confusion and really makes the employee feel like, you didn't really work with me at all to tell me when my last day was. So this should hopefully help with some of that experience. The other thing to really consider too, while you're building the offboarding workflow, obviously you're going to include the steps that protect company assets, so things that like sign them out, reset passwords, things that will kind of put the account in a holding state until you're kind of ready to do the deletion or the archiving of that user where no longer we need access to their data or maintain any of their communications in the interim. So one thing that I'll recommend is if you're not already taking advantage of this, and I already speak with a lot of people who manually do some sort of data transfers, and they'll usually specify this going over to the manager so they have a scalable process. Some people like to open this up. They'll actually request managers put a specific person in there. Or maybe you just have a holding account that's like ready to have that archive data. So that way when people ask for their data, you're kind of ready to transfer it out. My best recommendation for a process is just automatically transfer to the manager. This will save you the headache later of having to respond to tickets asking for that employee data later. So just save yourself the ticket time and give your managers basically access to that data. So you'll notice as I'm going through these different workflow steps, I'm doing things even like with Google, like transferring management of all groups that the user was a manager of and saying, you know what, go look over in their Google profile and specify, hey, let's send it over to the manager. And I'm doing this for group ownership, for management. I'm also doing this for primary calendar events. So that way the manager will have visibility at least to what that person was supposed to attend and work on. So that the manager could troubleshoot that calendar later. I could even free up conference rooms as a piece of that. So that way that's not clogging up conference room calendars because we're not even deciding if we've had the meeting yet. You could also transfer ownership of files over from the user to the manager. And, you know, based off what you're allowed to do on your local legal and regulatory compliance guidelines, you could include, exclude different private files and shared files, but I'll use this step to basically dynamically get all this stuff over to the manager so there's no question about what was that employee had access to what document. Manager is now the new owner. And now I want to start to work outside of tools other than Google. So I'll do things like copying over their OneDrive files over from the user to the manager. I will also do this with things like Box as well. If they have a Box account, I can move over their own items from user to this other user. Technical gotcha, just make sure in Better Cloud for some of these cross applications, you look up the manager in a prior step using the find user by email. So I put that reference over here and who's going to receive their Box files. When it comes to Dropbox, I've also done the same thing for that particular user, remove it from devices and then transfer it over to the manager. And again, it's pointing over to who their Google manager is. Of course, when we start to work cross application, you may want to introduce this step. So Dropbox is taking advantage of it. And then for a couple of our other providers like Zoom and Smartsheets, this is actually a little bit more hidden. Their APIs require you to do the transfer at the time of user deletion. So I'll have Better Cloud automatically do that user deletion for me. And at that time of deletion, I'll specify that their Google manager receives things like their meeting recording. So now they have an idea of like, what were they talking about in previous meetings and not make this so that IT is responsible for figuring that out. And I'll do the same thing for Smartsheets. So making sure that when the user gets deleted from Smartsheets, we transfer their sheets and transfer it over to the manager. Now, we would love to do this for as many integrations as possible. Again, it's really provider based, and if they have APIs to do this, we've also researched other apps like HubSpot. There are other applications that can do this. And obviously we'll want to introduce these to you as we encounter them. But best providers know about the struggle here around how do I enhance my collaboration after somebody leaves and make sure that IT isn't necessarily responsible for that and give it back to the data owners to make sure that they know what to do and how they want to delegate it. So this should kind of help with some of that post offboarding where's my stuff questions. And then this is more of a risk and security based topic, but I think it's important to cover. Better Cloud's files grid for things like Google, OneDrive, SharePoint, Box, Dropbox, Slack. We do get some metadata ingestion there and trying to understand what files did that person own. And while you're kind of planning this, and if especially if you like your employees do know about an offboarding coming, and that's why I recommend please make sure you tell them like last possible minute, unfortunately, because their relationship with their data will change. And a lot of the times we'll hear stories of, employees like trying to upload all their contacts out of Salesforce or try to download some reports out of there. Maybe they'll do things like with their Google Drive files and actually try to share them out with their personal email address because they're going to get ready for their next job. They want to like have all their templates, have the tools that made them successful at this job. But you really should give visibility to this activity and know if it's happening and if this is a problem that you need to do something, especially if that information is confidential, proprietary, sensitive in nature as well. So in this Better Cloud's files grid, you're looking at all those different shares with Google, Office 365, Box, Dropbox, Slack, right? And what I could do here is I have this shared with column that I could search for personal email addresses that may have been shared with this file. So let's say I'm aware of an employee that is unfortunately going to be offboarded. I'll just put in my email as an example. I may do something like look up my own Gmail address and see what files that employee has shared out. And, you know, like I see I shared out 2 files of myself, like these important links and contacts and salary calculations for my role. And that obviously gives me some pause. You know, I could design a workflows in Better Cloud's workflow builder that will revoke these and also send a message to them saying like, we know what you did. So depending on kind of what level of sensitivity, I recommend just like pulling it kind of without the employee knowing. But what I would do here is select these files, go into Better Cloud's action engine and use the action, once this loads up, that allows you to remove all external collaborators from these files. Or you could remove a specific external collaborator, specifically that Gmail. So you'll notice as you go through these different Google actions, they're all different remediation actions that you could do with these Google files. You'll notice there's one that's called remove file collaborators, another one that's called remove all external file collaborators. I could go into this remove file collaborators one and say, I'm going to remove a specific external user from it. So I want to be able to remove that Gmail address. I basically from those files click and take that action and we'll strip them off those files so they're no longer being shared out and that employee is no longer leaving with proprietary information. But you may want to use this files grid to do some more bigger deep dives and just try to assess how big of an issue this may be. So of course, I could even just broadly look for domains in the Gmail column and get an idea of like which files are being shared out, because you're going to try to want to do this in mass and try to figure out who's doing this. So you're going to look at specific owners and who are some of your biggest offenders here. Obviously, you may also want to take advantage of some of Better Cloud Secure latest features, the data exposure tab as well. We are able to show these insights too around how data is being shared out externally as well. You could click into this and what it will show you too are some of the most common external collaborators and basically kind of who are some of your tops in that list as well. So if you unfold this external collaborators, we'll start to show you who some of those most common email addresses that are being associated, maybe beyond just Gmail. You could see some Yahoo addresses on here. You can see some third-party partners. So take advantage of some of these new features we put in this year to help simplify how often is this behavior even happening as a whole. So with that, we've covered a lot. We've covered how to basically set different location-based triggers to trigger those offboardings on time. We've covered how to do data transfers to kind of help with some of the collaboration that happens post-offboarding. We also did a little bit of a risk analysis and how to look at some of these third-party or personal email sharing behaviors may be happening with some of your company assets when your employees are aware of offboarding. So just use Better Cloud. That's all I can say. So I hope this was useful for you. Obviously, we'd love to continue this discussion and conversation. You can email me at devin.domingo@bettercloud.com. Happy to talk to you about some of your challenges. And with that, I wish you best of luck. I know this is a tough time. I know people don't really want to go through with this. So please just keep your offboardings as human as possible. Give your employees good, ample resources. Make them feel valued. Send them personalized messages, like encourage your staff to do the right thing. With that, I thank you for your time. Hope this was informative and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks. Goodbye.